For a sweet, citrusy and refreshing drink, you need to try out this right here, a Japanese Yuzu highball. Let me show you how to make it. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and like I said, today I've got a nice, sweet, citrusy and refreshing cocktail for you. I've got a Japanese Yuzu highball, and I got the idea for this cocktail when I reviewed this whiskey right here, the Suntory Old. I'll put a link to that up there. I'll put a link to the review down below, which you can check out afterwards. But it's a nice little whiskey, especially for cocktails. It was designed by Suntory like 50, 60, 70 years ago, and it was designed as like an entry level into the higher level whiskey. So it was priced below some of their premium whiskeys, but definitely above their bottom shelf stuff. And it's meant to be used in like, I don't know, like restaurants where they'd have highballs, restaurants where it might be competing with sake, which was like the dominant alcohol in Japan at the time. And it's meant to be used in kind of cocktails like this, like the Japanese highball. So if you're not familiar with Japanese highballs, they're generally quite simple. They don't generally go for things like ginger ale or things like that. They basically just use whiskey, some citrus, and some sparkling water. So for me, I've got my whiskey here, my Suntory Old. I've got my sparkling water, which is just sparkling water. And for my citrus, I'm using yuzu juice. Now, yuzu is a Japanese or Asian kind of citrus. It's hard to describe the flavor exactly. Like, it's a little bit like a cross between a lemon, a lime, a green apple, and a grapefruit. So it's a bit tart, but a bit sweet on the same kind of vibe. It is very, very tasty though. I can't find in-season yuzus here in Ireland because we're heading to winter. So I've used this right here, which is kind of store-bought yuzu juice. It is 100% yuzu though, and it has to be used like within 3 days. So it is no preservatives, nothing like that in there. Quite nice, quite refreshing. If you can use fresh yuzus, absolutely use them, but me, I can't, so I'm using this, the best quality non-fresh yuzu juice I can find. I'm also going to add a little bit of this here. These are Rhubarb Bitters from the Fee brothers, so they're quite nice, and they add not a huge bitter note, but just an extra kind of fruity layer to it that I think works really well in highballs when you want kind of subtle flavors and you don't want to overpower the whiskey in the cocktail. Because if you were to use like Angostura Bitters, they're quite strong, they're quite upfront, they're quite dense, and those will definitely have an impact on the flavor. Whereas these Rhubarb Bitters, I found them to be fantastic for highballs because they add a little bit of flavor, a little bit of extra fruitiness, but they're not going to be the only thing you can taste. If you don't want them or you can't find them, you don't need to use them. This will be like a more classic Japanese highball. These will just elevate it a little bit more. So I think that's enough time talking about the cocktail, and I think it's time we make it. So it is going to be built in our glass, our highball glass. I'm going to pop a nice spear of ice into there because we're going to build it on top of our ice in our cocktail glass. So we're going to go in with 45 ml of our nice Japanese whiskey. This is, like I said, a little bit fancy, but not really fancy. It's not meant to be a top shelf whiskey. So we're going to go in with a nice 45 ml or ounce and a half of our whiskey into our cocktail. If you were to use a little bit more, I think it gets a bit unbalanced, a bit overpowering. And a highball is meant to be one of those cocktails that you can kind of sip, you can sit with for a little while, and you can definitely like enjoy it over a long period of time. Next, we're going to go in with our yuzu juice. I'm only going to go in with 15 ml or half an ounce of my yuzu juice. You can go in with more if you want. You can go in with less if you want. But because it's got this really like dense, citrusy, sweet flavor, again, to keep everything balanced, I'm only going to go in with a little bit because with yuzu juice, a little bit does go a long way. For my Rhubarb Bitters, again, you don't have to use them, but I do like the flavor of them. So I'm going to go in with one dash, it wasn't a proper dash, but like add a few extra drops, one dash of my Rhubarb Bitters to give it a nice extra layer of flavor. And then we're just going to top it off with our sparkling water. Just plain and simple sparkling water up to the top, just like that. And then we're going to go in with a little garnish. For me, if I could, I would use a little bit of like a yuzu peel, but I actually don't have fresh yuzu, so I don't have the yuzu peel. So I'm going to use this here, a little bit of a dehydrated lime. It'll add maybe a little bit of flavor, but it's more about that little pop of color. And of course, we're going to just do a quick little stir with our straw, just make sure everything's mixed up, pop our little dehydrated lime into there. And that right there is how I make a Japanese yuzu highball. Now real quick, before I taste this cocktail, if you're new here, scroll down, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey reviews every week, like the review of that Suntory Old, and I put out cocktail recipes featuring whiskey, like this one, every week, every Friday. So if you want to see more like that, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But right now, let's taste this cocktail. Cheers. This is one of the reasons why I have been loving highballs lately, because with a highball, because you're not using like a soda, because you're not using like a lot of sweet ingredients, you have to get like the sweetness from the whiskey, and that allows the whiskey to shine through into the final product. Like, yeah, there's a little bit of rhubarb bitters, like, yeah, there's some yuzu juice in there, and yeah, it's been diluted down by that sparkling water, but at the core, the base flavor of this cocktail is that whiskey, and I think that's really nice because it lets you enjoy it in a very refreshing way. Like, that whiskey, it's nothing special, there's nothing wrong with it, it's a very nice, simple enough, classic blend, and it does come through here. Like, you get that whiskey flavor, but you don't feel guilty about using it in a cocktail like this. The bit of yuzu juice adds a bit of zing, adds a bit of like vibrancy to the cocktail without, again, being overpowering, without being the only thing you can taste. The rhubarb bitters, like I said, can't really taste them. They add like a little bit of a roundness, maybe a little bit of a richness, just adding a different dimension to it. But again, the main vibe here is that whiskey and that yuzu juice made a little bit more refreshing by the addition of that sparkling water. So I'm going to keep on enjoying it, and I'll see you next time. Sláinte.